Let's begin, though, with the U.S. decision to lift its 10% tax on Canadian aluminum. In a statement, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said the move followed, quote, consultations with Canadian officials, and it came right before this government was to announce retaliatory tariffs on American products. Are there those strings attached? Mary Ng is the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. She joins us here in Ottawa. Hi, Minister Ng. Good to see you as always.
Always good to see you, Vashi.
The release today announcing from the U.S. Trade Representative that they would no longer be applying these tariffs to Canadian aluminum products stated that they expected those imports to decline by 50% compared to the surge that they'd seen in January through July. Did your government strike any kind of deal to that effect?
No, not at all. In fact, today's decision is that by the USTR, by the administration, and we welcome it. This morning, when we woke up, Canadian aluminum products going to the United States would have faced a 10% tariff, and now they do not, and they do not retroactively to September the 1st.
Respectively, though, Minister, it's not that they don't. It's that if they don't hit that quota per month that has been set out quite explicitly by the USTR, then there won't be any tariffs. But there still very much is the chance of tariffs if those quotas, as outlined by the USTR, are exceeded.
Well, I think what you're referring to is the release put out by the U.S. administration, and I want to be very clear with our aluminum sector and our workers. This is not a negotiation. Canada did not concede anything. What this decision is a good one for the Canadian industry and for our workers, also for the American workers as well, that these tariffs will be lifted retroactive to September the 1st.
I take your point. I'm not saying that you agreed to those quotas, but certainly they are stipulated by the U.S. administration. My question to you is, as someone who knows the industry very well and who is acquainted with the levels of imports, do you think that Canadian exports to the United States are going to decline by as much as the administration says they expect them to?
Well, I think that the industry has certainly seen the ebbs and flows as a result of COVID-19. And I think what today's decision, and we welcome it, is recognizing that the levels have normalized and that these tariffs will be removed. But I would say, though, to the Canadian industry, that should tariffs be reimposed, that we will retaliate with dollar-for-dollar countermeasures against any tariffs that may be levied in the future.
Would you do that immediately, Minister? If in fact these tariffs did come back, would you levy those counter tariffs immediately, or would you go through another consultation period?
We've been very clear. We have spent the last month in consultations on a list of aluminum and aluminum-containing products that come into Canada, and we've been very clear. By listening to so many Canadians and the industry, and we are quite prepared to retaliate dollar for dollar in countermeasures should there be additional tariffs that get imposed. But today, I think what is really good about this decision, particularly right now in the context of COVID-19, where we are so focused on helping our businesses recover, and today I don't think businesses need more taxes. I think what they need is help and support from their governments, and I want Canadian businesses to know that we will always stand up for them. We will always stand up for the aluminum industry, and very pleased with today's decision.
I just want to be clear, though, because in some of our early conversations with people in the industry, those quotas, as outlined by the administration, are of some concern to them. I know that you talked about the ebbs and the flows, but I just want to provide for our viewers an example of what the quotas would mean, what the U.S. is expecting. In the month of July, Canada exported about 171,000 U.S. tons to the U.S. of the aluminum products that are being tariffed. The U.S. expects Canadian exports of these products to fall to 83,000 U.S. tons. So they expect it to go from 171,000 to 83,000. Do you think that Canadian exports will exceed that number?
Well, I think that what you're seeing in those numbers that are reflected is the economy returning and bouncing back. We had levels that were that changed as a result of COVID-19 and manufacturing slowing down in the United States, but also here in Canada. And I just want to be really clear. I mean, what you're referring to is a decision that the United States have made unilaterally on their own. We welcome the decision, of course, to lift the tariffs, the Canadian industry can be assured that we will continue to always stand up for them, and we're just going to keep doing that.
It is, yeah, I'm glad you're clear. This is stipulated by the Americans, by the White House administration. I've asked you already, and you said no, that it wasn't a deal arrived at, these quotas, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they still do exist. The other thing I want to ask you about, as stipulated in this release from the USTR, is around them reviewing basically what they have imported and the timing of that. They're going to do it about 6 weeks after the end of September, which happens to fall right after, basically right after the American election. Does that take away some of the leverage that your government has been able to employ? And I'm talking specifically about those counter tariffs, that list that you came up with, which was very targeted, for example, to swing states, to states or to interests that candidates would have had in the election. Once you remove the election from the equation, does that spell trouble for your government?
I think that what is important right now and certainly into the future is making sure that it is tariff-free for our Canadian aluminum workers and for the industry. We're going to keep working with our industry, absolutely. And we have been very clear that these tariffs were unjustified and that they were unwarranted. We agree. We're pleased that the United States have concluded today that as we do, that these tariffs are unwarranted, and we're pleased with the decision. And nothing is a guarantee into the future, but absolutely for today. And we're very pleased with this decision, and we will continue to fight for our aluminum workers. And as I said, Canada remains committed. In the future, should there be tariffs, we will continue to reserve our right to impose dollar-for-dollar countermeasures.
Without the leverage of the election, though, are you worried?
I think that every day, as we are fighting COVID-19 and helping businesses recover, that the viability of our businesses and the competitiveness of our businesses is top of mind every single day. And we're going to continue fighting on their behalf, standing up for their behalf. And this really has been a Team Canada approach. So I really want to thank the industry. I want to thank the workers. I want to thank Labour, who have all worked with us. I want to thank our incredible team in Washington and our ambassador. And this is a Team Canada approach, and we're going to keep doing this.
I appreciate that, certainly, Minister, but with respect, that doesn't answer my question at all. There is a very political environment surrounding all this, one acknowledged by the list of counter tariffs produced by your government. If there are no products in swing states to target, does that take away your government's and this country's leverage in this fight against tariffs?
I think it's really important today to focus on what this decision is. And this decision is a really terrific one for the industry. And we're going to keep working on behalf of the industry for their access to keep trading and doing business with their American counterparts.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your time, as always.
Thanks so much, Vashi.
That's Mary Ng. She's the Minister for International Trade and Export Promotion, speaking to us from Ottawa. We want to get the perspective, though, from the other side of the border now. Bruce Heyman served, of course, as U.S. Ambassador to Canada under President Barack Obama. He joins us from Aspen, Colorado, I believe. Hi, Ambassador Heyman. Pleasure to see you, as always.
Good to see you again, Vashi.
I was anxious to talk to you because your tweet really jumped out at me earlier today following this announcement about the U.S. backing down from these tariffs. You said that you had the backstory. What is the backstory?
So let's just take a step back and understand that Lighthizer and team really want a quota system and tariff system on steel and aluminum with Canada. And you saw that in the NAFTA negotiations. They immediately put tariffs on the basis of national security, which we know is a false narrative. And so moving ahead, what he had was a window, and that window was just a few months during a pandemic where they could extrapolate numbers. And to make it easy for your listeners to understand this, if an aluminum smelter, let's say they make two types of aluminum. One type, let's just call it vanilla, plain aluminum, and the other type, value-added product, a specialty product. That specialty product would go into like the Ford pickup trucks and would go into very specialized uses of aluminum. But because manufacturing all was depressed during this pandemic, and you still had to run your smelter and your aluminum processing, you had more of this plain vanilla. And so that is what was shipped. And so those numbers ballooned up. And yes, it is only during that period of time, because now that the economy's come back, that value-added product demand is picking back up. And so the mix of the aluminum has changed again. But they used that little window to say, let's take this to our political advantage, achieve two things. One, we really want to get that quota system with Canada. And two, this could be a good political narrative for us back at home. Rah, rah, we're fighting for the American worker and Canada's taking advantage of us, which was not true. But what they found quickly was the aluminum industry in the United States, the Chamber of Commerce, manufacturers, and several governors have written to the White House and USTR just this last week and said, hey, this is bad news for us, and if we get retaliation, it's going to hurt us. We had another issue going on in the States, and that is we have a shortage, believe it or not, of aluminum cans because of all this drinking at home and not using taps at bars. So we have a shortage of aluminum cans. And so the narrative began that because of the moves that the U.S. administration was doing, it was squeezing the aluminum can business and raising the price of beer and these other alcoholic quick, drinks that are now quite popular. And as a result of that, there are a lot of people in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and these other states that would feel directly this impact. It was a losing proposition politically. And then, of course, with the economy picking up, it's a losing story with regard to the mix of aluminum. So the U.S. administration had to back down, and they had to back down in light of this that would have been put on by the Canadians.
So let me ask.
While I was ambassador,
yes,
go ahead.
No, pardon me. You were pausing there. Go ahead.
So while I was ambassador, the message came to me that there are no better negotiators across the table from Americans than the Canadians. They know how to negotiate as well as anybody across the table. I don't think, and watching the NAFTA negotiations and then watching what just happened here, that's so naive of USTR in their behavior and their interactions and reactions. Donald Trump tried to treat you like some cement contractor on a construction process. I'm going to squeeze you. I'm not going to pay you. I'm going to tariff your autos. I'm going to do this and that. And you know what? Kudos to the Canadian government here, who was calm and steady throughout the process, but steely in terms of negotiation, which is what I experienced in TPP and, country of origin labeling on beef and those kinds of things. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you how, specifically, I guess, what it is you thought convinced the USTR, because you lay out all these very cogent arguments that have been laid out in the past to no avail, right? And I say that only because the USTR and in the White House administration has ignored those very salient arguments in the past and proceeded with levying tariffs or other punitive taxation measures. What do you think this time made the difference? Was it the counter tariffs, or was it the political calculation? Like, what exactly do you think took it over the line?
So I think it's the political calculation, the combination of the counter tariffs. Look, you have to look at each window now going up to the election day. Each day is a news day, and each day the administration wants to control the news of the day. Today was Peace in the Middle East Day. The last thing they needed was a trade war with Canada Day on top of their Peace Middle East Day. And so it's a combination of the politics, the pressure they were getting from industry and governors at our border and a lot of industries, and then just the math. The realization is that the narrative was just blowing up in their face.
Okay, I also have to ask you about some of what is, and I know you heard my interview with Minister Ng. How concerned should we be about what is kind of stipulated in this release, which is, yeah, we're taking off the tariffs, but here are 15 things that could happen to have us reapply them, and especially the timing around our first review will basically happen right after the election. Obviously, this is going to depend on the outcome of the election, but I just imagine, a world in which there is no Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or Michigan or those states that we could very much target specifically with our counter tariffs, and the idea of a swing state is no longer in play because the election is done. And I wonder from your perspective how worried we should be about the potential for these tariffs later on.
I think you should worry about one thing, and that is what happens on November 3rd. If what happens on November 3rd, that this president is reelected, he's going to be the extreme of himself. And that all the things that Canada has experienced over this last 3.5 years, you just might dial that up and multiply it times 2. For whatever reason, this president has some issue with Canada. He has said it repeatedly. He has behaved this way. And I don't understand it at all, given my knowledge and experience with Canada and this deep, important relationship we have. I will tell you, in the Biden administration, I can't make any promises with regard to trade or differences, but we will always have differences between the two of us. It's just how you handle the differences. It's like a family, as opposed to just going in and saying, this is it, do it my way or the highway, is just not the way a partnership works. And so that's why and you know this, have been appealing to Americans in Canada to just get out and vote. And let's reorient this relationship and go to votefromabroad.org and just vote. And so I think the math is there. The number of people who support Joe Biden and an important relationship with Canada are there. It's just a matter of whether the votes come out. And I hope that that's the case.
Okay, I'm out of time. I have so much more I could ask you, especially about Mr. Biden, but I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Heyman. Appreciate your time as always.
It's a pleasure.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Bruce Heyman there, coming to us from Colorado.
When we woke up this morning, when Canada's aluminum workers woke up this morning, 10% tariffs were levied on every shipment of Canadian aluminum to the United States. We now know that starting from September 1, Canadian aluminum exports to the United States have been tariff-free, as they ought to be. There are no guarantees going forward. As we have learned, there are not in our trading relationship with this administration. We will impose retaliatory tariffs if tariffs are levied against our exports. But this is really a day when common sense has prevailed, and that's good news.
That's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland reacting to news U.S. aluminum tariffs have been lifted hours before she was to announce countermeasures on those duties. The U.S. appears to have backed down. Minister Freeland repeated several times this is not a deal. It was a unilateral decision by the Americans to drop the duties. So is this a win for Canada, or did the U.S. simply impose quotas on how much aluminum Canada can export south? The Power Panel is here over in Toronto. Supriya Dwivedi, host of The Morning Show, Global News Radio 640 Toronto. Shakir Chambers, senior consultant at Navigator, also joins us from Toronto. Over in Gatineau, political commentator and former NDP MP Françoise Boivin. And Paul Wells is a senior writer for Maclean's. He's here in Ottawa. Hi, everybody. Paul, I'll start with you. Clearly, this was not a deal arrived at. I think my interview with Minister Ng, as well as all the comments from Minister Freeland, make that very apparent. But it also is clear that there are quotas, basically, that the U.S. government has said, well, if you exceed this, we're probably going to put tariffs back on them.
Yeah, that addresses the original reason for the tariffs in the first place, which was that short of other markets for primary aluminum, the Canadian aluminum industry was sending it into the American market at a higher rate than they normally do. And so the Americans started to freak out a bit, and Donald Trump tends not to freak out less than other Americans, but rather more. And so he decided he would impose new tariffs. it was always worth remembering that an announcement from this administration is not the same as a gesture or an act from this administration, and that between the announcement and the act, there was some room to continue to apply pressure and to continue to seek to appease the administration. It looks like the Canadians, led by Ms. Freeland, did a bit of both and reassured the Americans about the extent of our dumping into their market, and also reminded every American who would pay the cost of these tariffs that they would be paying the cost of the tariffs. And some of that message seems to have gotten back to the White House.
Yeah, it sounds, Supriya, like that message was at least delivered to a number of people. We had Bruce Heyman, the former ambassador, on the show. And he was saying that in the last few days, especially, even that there were many of those sort of vested parties specifically appealing to the USTR. It's interesting that this time around they actually listened, because there have been instances of this in the past where those arguments have been presented and everyone just turns their ear, turns their eye.
Yeah, and that's certainly something to be said, and I think that's kind of what Paul was getting at here. I mean, to what Paul was saying, I think the other risk is that all of this could just go away in a tweet, right? At one point, if Trump feels as though this isn't something that he wants to go through with. You had mentioned the unilateral word that was thrown around quite readily at that presser. The other thing, though, and you touched on this, is the fact that there was an emphasis on not just industry stakeholders bringing that argument, but really a collaborative approach. I think the word was Team Canada, or the term was Team Canada, giving credit to provincial governments. But the threat still looms. I would imagine that back on this panel, fast forward 3-4 months from now, we may in fact be having a very similar conversation. And the reality is that if Trump is in fact reelected, which is a very real possibility, then we're going to have a whole host of other issues. And I think it just goes to the long line of very smart people who have been making the point that Canada needs to diversify our trading partners. We need someone else, so we need, somewhere else to put all our stuff.
Yeah, to your point, Supriya, in the actual release today, there is a timeline in which they stipulate, okay, here's when we're going to review if the imports met these quotas, and then we'll decide if they haven't, we're going to levy more tariffs on them. That timing is literally 6 weeks from the end of September, which is right after the election. So it's not secure, politics is not a part of this at all. And certainly that was a part of the strategy on the Canadians' part when it comes to focusing the counter tariffs, especially on swing states where they matter. But it's also going to be a part of the calculation the president makes.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, I mean, he's a very unpredictable president. I think ultimately this was just a kind of a ploy to ensure he can go to his voters in those swing states and point to something and say, look what I've done for you. It's not a matter of having the tariffs in place, but it's being able to point that we're being able to monitor the amount of aluminum that the Canada brings into the United States. If they violate these numbers, which is a pretty steep decline going into September and October, we're monitoring the amount of aluminum, and if they import more than that, we can easily slap tariffs back on. And I think that's what his voters want to hear. We're going to fight for you. We're going to ensure we protect your jobs. With Donald Trump, as we know, a lot of his policy is more about rhetoric than the actual wise or wisdom of his policy. And I think this is just a lot about rhetoric throughout the campaign trail to ensure that he knows those states that have manufacturing bases know that he's out there supporting them and fighting for them.
Yeah, Françoise, the statement or the decision from the United States certainly isn't one for unencumbered free trade, right? It's pretty much the statement they released is one that points to managed trade. I know this was a big issue in Quebec. How is the decision going over there?
It's received well. I mean, Premier Legault already tweeted that he was very happy with the result, but it's when you go into the details that sometimes the devil lies. And you asked a few questions that were pretty straightforward to Minister Ng during the interview, like, is the government ready if ever the American administration would change their mind? And like somebody was saying, it's as fast as a tweet away. They were never very clear on the what exactly would they be doing. I think they were pretty, how can I say, soulagé, relieved that they didn't have to actually start a trade war today with the Trump administration. So, but I'm still not yet sure of what they will do if something happens. So, and like ex-Ambassador Hyman was saying, if Trump gets reelected in November, be afraid, be very afraid.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.